Coming up this week, might you soon be voting to give more power to the mayor? Plus, despite a multi-billion-dollar makeover, why is downtown experiencing a massive job drain? A protest at the private home of Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach creates a stir. Also this half hour, is it really 3 times worse if you live in Jackson County? And drones come to Kansas. I'm Nick Haynes. Great to have you with us again on the program that goes beyond the soundbite and takes you behind the headlines, making news in Kansas City, dissecting those news stories this week. KCTV5's chief investigative reporter, Stacey Cameron, KCPT special correspondent, Sam Zeff, the senior writer for the Call newspaper, Eric Wesson, and Kansas City Star reporter, columnist and blogger, Dave Helling. Might you soon be voting to give more power to Kansas City, Missouri Mayor Sly James? A new Charter Review Commission meeting for the first time this week could alter the balance of power in Kansas City, giving the mayor far more political clout and changing the way city council members are elected, with fewer at-large seats in favor of members elected by sub-district. But why the impetus behind these latest changes, Eric Wesson? Why does there need to be a change at all?
Well, the philosophy is that because minorities can't get hired, or elected rather, in at-large seats. When you stop and think about it, I think one of the things they say is 73% of the council are non-minorities, but they only comprise 51% of the total population of Kansas City. So that's the philosophy behind it.
How about the philosophy behind giving Mayor Sly James more power?
That is going to be an interesting thing. I think for the most part, people don't want the mayor to have absolute power like that. What happens if it's not a popular mayor that was a trial attorney that can persuade people into doing things that they want to do? What happens then with the mayor's office having all that power? So it's going to be interesting to see how he works that deal out.
So what's behind all of this then, Dave?
Well, I think Eric's right. It is minority votes, but I think it's more particularly Hispanic votes. The Latino community is more concerned. The African-American representation on the city council, if you count the mayor, which you should since he has a vote, is actually 30%, roughly 30%, and roughly 30% of Kansas City is African-American. So there is kind of a rough balance there, but there is no Latino representation at all. And that's a great concern in the Latino community. And so this came up when redistricting took place. The idea was to expand the council perhaps, or at least elect more people in district, giving minorities a better chance to win, and then narrowing the number or perhaps eliminating the number of at-large seats on the city council. You
wrote a column this week, though, to say historically, though, that is exactly the way Kansas City used to do it.
Well, right.
Why the change?
Well, in 1925, led by a gentleman you may have heard of, Tom Pendergast, the charter was changed to smush everything together, one house rather than two. And really, when you think about it, having a two-house legislature in a city is probably a bridge too far. But the idea was to try to marry the at-large representation with the in-district representation, Nick, because they're very different things. In-district council members are primarily focused on the money, resources, time spent on their district, and that makes sense. That's why you have in-district people. The at-large people are supposed to have a broader view of the city's health as a whole, but I think there is some concern that they're not executing that as well as possible. So the idea is to shrink that, expand the districts, and as I wrote today, I think ultimately that would give the mayor more power, even if he isn't officially or she isn't officially given power. He would have more authority because of that restructuring.
How does tinkering, though, with the system of how we give powers here and there to the mayor, or changing the way the city council members are elected, change the actual output for average citizens living in Kansas City, Missouri, Stacey?
I think it potentially could change it a great deal, because if we start to increase the number of districts, then we start to give smaller pockets of people voices. If you look at cities that we often compare ourselves to, like Denver and Indianapolis, they don't have this issue where there are a number of at-large councilmen or councilwomen who are elected. Indianapolis, for example, I think has 25 districts and only 4 at-large people. So what happens is these small groups of people start to have a greater voice. When you have 6 districts here, like we do in Kansas City, that have people who are voted by their district, but then 6 at-large as well, plus the mayor, it seems to be more of a city group. So you start to get neighborhoods like in the 3rd and the 5th district that don't have as much of a voice as others might, let's say like the Northland. So I think it would start to change some of the resources in the city, and it would start to put more of an emphasis on a stronger mayoral form of government, like Indianapolis and Denver, which they don't have the civic problems moving forward economically, I think, that we do.
Eric?
I think it's more of the quality of the candidates that people are putting up to run for elections. In the black community specifically, it deals with people that don't know anything about the budget. They don't know how to get consensus among people that are on the board, on the city council. So therefore what you have is you would have more ineffective people rather than have less ineffective people. You have people in there that don't feel like that they have accountability to taxpayers about what they do with $15,000. That has nothing to do with redistricting. That has to do with the quality of people, the informed people that you send to run for elected office.
Sam?
I think Kansas City really is a little bit of an outlier in an urban area, that most big cities have a strong mayor form of government. The good thing about that is you know who's in charge, you know who to blame, you know who to praise. There's something to be said for patronage. Maybe this is my 17 years in Philadelphia, but you always know where to go and you know who to blame instead of this sort of diffused responsibility that it's hard to pin down.
This is not an academic exercise. The Charter Review Commission that's looking at this task force, is going to have its findings at the end of July, and this could be placed on the ballot this November, Dave.
Although I talked to Lynn Horsley, our City Hall reporter, this morning, and she says the commission was told earlier this week at its first meeting that the possibility of getting something ready in time for November is virtually nil. I think Bill Geary said it's just not going to happen. It's very complicated, a lot of moving parts. My guess is 2014 is a better target for any changes if they come, and that's a big if.
But this has come up many times before, and there has been a huge reluctance to give the mayor more power.
Particularly in the African-American
Missouri
community, frankly, because they're worried about a powerful mayor usurping authority within the districts that they represent. It's a very, very tough sell.
And you got to realize this too, that the council is going to have to approve putting this on the ballot, and anything that would change their power or limit it, they're not going to go for it. So this getting on the ballot 2013, 2014, 15, not going to happen.
Eric?
Fire department, local control, the police department. I think one of the concepts is the mayor's having the ability to hire the city manager without going in through the council. That was one of the examples that was given. I think it's going to be a lot of thought and conversation about how much power do you want to put in the mayor's office. And that's going to be an interesting conversation. But I think that SLIVE will be able to convince people that it's a good idea.
But that won't happen until probably until next year.
Could happen in November, but every indication is it's so complicated, so difficult, it'll be 2014, if at all.
Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach claims immigration reform activists who protested outside his home this week were committing acts of intimidation and were no different than the KKK. The story was making national news this week.
This is exactly, they're just not wearing white cloaks, but this is exactly KKK type of intimidation.
The Kansas Secretary of State calls what happened on his front porch this past weekend, quote, appalling. Hundreds of people from the Sunflower Community Action Group came to his home to protest against his stance on immigration. Watch this.
We've left these shoes here so that Mr. Kobach can maybe try to fill them, because these are the shoes of the fathers that he's deported, that have been deported by his laws that he's lobbied for and passed. Kobach separates families.
Now, thankfully, Mr. Kobach and his family were not home at the time, but he said that if he was, he would have been very afraid, especially since it took police 15 minutes to respond.
Now, bear in mind.
So why did they go to Kobach's private home in the first place? Isn't that crossing a line, Stacey?
Well, the reason they did it, they had originally gone to Topeka several times, this Wichita-based group, to try to confront Kobach at his Secretary of State office, but they were told by state officials that the activities that you're worried about, these certain state laws and these immigration policies that he's drafted, he's doing out of his own private law practice, and the office is at home. So they went there to confront him. and they crossed a serious line. If this group had any legitimacy, when they went onto his front step, they lost any legitimacy they had. You've got an absolute right in public places to protest someone's policies or protest their viewpoints. But when you come onto their home, when you come onto private property, you've crossed a line. Now, Kobach did too. I mean, these weren't KKK type of intimidation tactics. KKK murdered people. They lynched people. They burned crosses in people's front lawns. This group hasn't done it. But unfortunately, anything that they wanted to say got thrown out the window when they made Kobach look like a victim, and he could go on Glenn Beck, he could go on Sean Hannity and start to say, look at me, I've been threatened, they've used terrorist tactics. So this became a whole joke, and we lost track of the real issue, which was immigration policy and reform in this country.
Is there anything illegal, though, to go to somebody's home and be protesting like that?
Oh, certainly not. And if anybody knows that, you know, Stacey does, because you can go and knock on anybody's door anytime you want, and if and you only have to leave if they tell you you have to go or there's a no trespassing.
No, that's absolutely wrong there. Look,
Yeah.
This is clearly a case of civil trespass.
Yeah.
If there were any damage to his property, it's a prima facie case, he wins. Whether or not it's going to be a criminal trespass case, very well may be. You don't have the right to go up. First Amendment rights on public spaces, absolutely. But to come up his sidewalk, to stand on his front porch, to bang on the door, to continue to ask them to call out, there is a question as to whether or not that was criminal trespass. Civilly, they clearly trespass. So it's a clear line. I mean, it's something that we don't want. It's something that we don't invite in this country. So I beg the exception. It's clearly civil trespass. It very well may be criminal trespass. Let's remember, police in that jurisdiction are now investigating to see whether a crime was committed.
Well, of course they're going to investigate, because the Secretary of State has called them up and said, you know what, you need to investigate. I still don't think there was a criminal trespass there, but I think the more important issue here is that all of a sudden, Chris Kobach goes on TV and he starts talking about the Second Amendment. You know, it's this notion in politics of, you know, man the parapets, prepare to repel borders. And mind you, I know I'm mixing my military metaphors here, but the fact that he would even talk about going to get a gun for some group that includes nuns and priests with the name Sunflower in their title is an outrage, and I think that has gotten lost in the debate.
But by and large, though, you don't normally see scores, in this case hundreds of protesters outside a public official's home. We have not seen that in our broader metropolitan area, have we, Dave, against politicians?
It's not. It happens in this area. It
doesn't
happen at all. But it doesn't. But it has happened. It
Yes.
has happened in other places. But it's very rare. The law is a little bit confusing on some of this stuff, as you've heard around this table. I think as a political matter, Nick, the problem is that Chris Kobach's influence in the immigration debate was clearly on the wane. I mean, he lost the Arizona case. Mitt Romney, in essence, disowned him earlier in the presidential campaign, despite, you know, Chris's role in advising them on immigration policy. His star was really fading nationally about immigration. This protest actually revived that and makes him once again sort of the poster child, poster man, whatever, for immigration opposition in the United States. And in that sense, the Sunflower protest as a political matter probably backfired.
Eric.
I think they did it to Funkhauser during his first term. Well, the first couple of months that he was in office, they went by his home, but they were out on
Francis
the side,
Simler,
right?
wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
On Simler, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And also one of the school board members, when they were going through the thing with ACE, school went by Carl Evans' house on Prospect and was protesting and walked up on his front step. I think he has a trespassing sign. That's where the problem came in at. But I would agree that I don't think it was appropriate. You know, his family is in there, if he's got kids or so forth. I think that draws the line. Catch him in his car backing out of his driveway or something, but to come up on his property, that changes the complexion of the conversation from what you're talking about immigration to you actually trespassing, coming on my property, endangering my family. And I think that that's the two. They could have caught him in the Capitol parking lot or something and said something, even though it's something that he's doing privately. I think they were out of law.
Despite billions of dollars in new investment, from the Power and Light District to a brand new arena, Kansas City's downtown makeover has failed to draw business. In fact, census figures reported this week show that rather than adding new jobs over the last decade, there's been a loss of more than 16,000 private sector jobs. That decade covers the period from shortly before the downtown redevelopment boom began to just after the major redevelopment projects like the Kansas City Power and Light District and Sprint Center were completed. But why have businesses pretty much been no shows?
Well, a couple of reasons, Nick. First of all, getting in and out of downtown is still a bit of a challenge. Parking is still a problem. There are still fears about crime, which I think are a little overblown. Mostly, though, it's because much of the office space downtown is not what they call Class A space. It's just, they're older buildings, they're hard to reconfigure, they're hard to make modern for computers and other digital endeavors. Much easier to find an old loft somewhere if you want to be close to the center city or build in the suburbs. And then, of course, mix in the ongoing battle between Kansas and Missouri to incent businesses to move in and out of downtown. Probably not a surprise that the job creation down there has been a very big challenge.
Now, I was looking at the quote here from Bill Dietrich, who is the president and CEO of the Downtown Council. He says, "It could have been worse if the city hadn't reinvested so heavily in downtown over the last decade." Is that a fair argument, Eric?
No. No, it hasn't. I guess you could make that argument. It could always be worse. But, you know, the Power and Light District, it continues to prove to be a failed project. How did they bail out of it? I don't know. It started out with the racial things going on. People were uncomfortable about going down there, so businesses don't move down there because of the aftermath of that. Peachtree Restaurant is one example of people that were forced to move out. A lot of businesses and restaurants down there say the rent is too high. There's nothing down there to attract people other than the times when the NCAA tournaments come around and so forth. So it was a bad, it looked good on paper, but I think it's proven to be a bad concept.
Are we looking at, though, the downtown revitalization being part of, though, getting people to live and play downtown? And is it too much to ask people to be also working downtown, Stacey?
I don't think it is, and I think I would have to agree that it would be worse if we didn't have the development in the power and light that we have. I mean, if you look at cities, for example, like St. Louis and Cincinnati, that absolutely have no type of downtown activity, they have no type of retail, they have no type of entertainment. Those cities, essentially the sidewalk rolls up at 5 o'clock and it's non-existent on the weekend. So we also have to look at it's something else in those numbers. The time frame we're talking about is 2001 to 2011. We forget what happened about midway through that time, which was the recession of 2008. I bet if you broke those numbers down, a lot of those job losses would have occurred in the last 4 years. I just saw a piece earlier this week that shows how many office management jobs have been lost. I bet a number of those are in that type of sector. Now, there's a lot to be improved on in the downtown area. I don't think it's too much to ask for people to work and live downtown and to play downtown. That's why I moved there. You look at similar sized cities and they just don't offer the amenities downtown that Kansas City does. However, there's still a big issue, and this raises, how do we get businesses down there? And I think Dave hit on the prime thing, Class A space for office and parking.
Okay, so does that now mean we have to do a new huge more investment, huge more subsidies downtown to be able to get those Class A office facilities downtown?
Well, there's a lot of talk of a convention hotel, which we've discussed here before. I don't think there are any major Class A construction projects on the board, Nick. I do think that there is some discussion going on of ways to increase traffic in the Power and Light District. The housing actually is in great demand. It's hard to find apartments or condominiums to purchase downtown. But, you know, this week, Mayor James talked to the newspaper about a hockey team in the Sprint Arena, and he said we didn't want to go after this particular team, but we're making $8 million a year on Sprint Arena as it is anyway because we get a kickback from AEG. But they're spending $14 million a year to subsidize Power and Light. It's always a balance. It's always trying to sort of understand, is it actually worth it at the end of the day? And I would say in that regard, the jury is still out, because Stacey's right. If we hadn't have done this, it would have been a mess down there. But having done it, it is expensive. It does cost taxpayers, and we'll have to figure out whether that bargain was worth it. I don't think we're in a position to make that judgment.
And there may be need to look at a makeover of the Power and Light, what type of businesses are down there. I mean, I don't go to the Power and Light a lot, and I'm a big champion of it, but I don't because it's mostly chain type of entertainment, chain type of restaurants and bars. If it was something that was Kansas City centric, it would draw not only tourists, but it would draw people like me. I think it would draw people from Overland Park and Lee Summit. So maybe as we go forward and some businesses come out and we recycle new businesses in, we need to look at a thing to make this a Kansas City signature place, and maybe then the revenue would pick up in businesses as well.
I think they need a nationally known retail like Macy's or Dillard's or someplace like that to bring people down. people that go down there, that's their destination. Usually when businesses are successful, it's a lot of foot traffic. People are going here, they're going there, they're going other places.
Like the plaza.
Like the plaza. It's that. So since they don't have that concept down there, I think it, you know, and like he said, it could always be worse, but I don't think that right now they have the right plan in place for that area.
We move on This Week in Review. Did you know that at Kansas State University you can now graduate with a degree in drones? Yep, K-State is one of the first schools in the nation to offer a Bachelor of Science in Unmanned Aircraft Systems. While many of us think of drones as just the latest stealth weapon, those who make the aerial devices say they could soon be huge commercial money makers. But video of Hellfire missile strikes and the news this week that the FBI is using drones for domestic surveillance here in the United States is complicating the industry. On KCPT's The Local Show last night, KCPT's special correspondent Sam Zeff took us inside the K-State drone program. Here's an excerpt.
Okay, let's just get this part of the story out of the way right now. Admit it. This is how you think of drones, or as people in the drone business like to call them, unmanned aerial vehicles. And even though weaponized drones get the most attention, the world is quickly finding ways to commercialize them. A guy in Australia uses drones to sell real estate. FedEx has fantasies of using a drone similar to this one to move packages. And you probably saw this. Domino's little PR stunt in the UK using a drone to deliver pizza. But the most immediate drone applications might be right here in Kansas and Missouri. We're on I-70 heading westbound just outside of Abilene, and we're on our way to Salina, which is arguably the epicenter for drone research in the Midwest.
For about $1,500, we'll have an aircraft that can fly and do agriculture research. And in about an hour's worth of flying, we can fly about 800 to 1,000 acres.
This is the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Lab at the K-State Salina campus, which is on the old historic Smoky Hill Air Force Base. We're getting a drone tour today from Program Manager Mark Blanks. Kansas State has been teaching aviation for years and was one of the first universities to get into drones. They believe the first large commercial use will be in agriculture.
We can tell if the plant is receiving adequate nourishment, if it's receiving adequate moisture, if the plant is stressed in any way due to pests or disease.
In the upper left corner here, we see the actual attitude of the aircraft. This looks like a traditional manned instrument, a manned airplane.
And that's the horizon?
Yes, the green is the horizon. This also tells us the airspeed, the altitude, the direction it's flying.
And here's the thing that is both really cool and just a little bit scary. All of these drones can be flown with a laptop and, in some cases, a tablet. The pilot will plot a course on the map and then, well, look at this. The drone can be launched off the top of a car, or there's a catapult that can instantly get it going 40 miles an hour. This may look like nothing more than model airplanes, but it's the cutting edge in drone technology.
You can see Sam's full report on drones on the rebroadcast of The Local Show Sunday evening at 5:30. Sam, what happened to those bills, both in Kansas and Missouri, that would have prevented any drones being used for domestic surveillance in Kansas or Missouri without a search warrant?
Neither of them came out of the legislature. In Missouri, it passed the House. In Kansas, it didn't come out of committee. Now, both of those bills are still alive, and both of their sponsors say that they will bring them up again when the legislatures reconvene next session.
Now, I also heard that MU also has now got a new drone journalism program. What's the purpose of that?
Well, the journalism program said it was to give them the ability to go, let's say, in flooding areas and other natures of that, where they could get overhead and get video of events like that, not for the purpose of spying or things like that, but simply where they could put a camera up and videotape. And with respect to that one, the people piloting that drone, they weren't as sophisticated as these. They'd have to be within 200 or 300 yards, and I think the drone would only fly about 20 feet into the air. So it's just simply getting access to where maybe our helicopters would in other instances.
But the concern, though, of legislators is that they may be used by to look at what's happening on farms in Missouri or Kansas, and it's, you know, journalists, it may be like a KCTV5 or another TV station, using them to be, you know, looking at the stories. It is a concern about privacy.
Well, of course, yeah, there is a concern about privacy. But as I was walking in, part of this, we talked to the Kansas National Guard. And when I sat down to interview the Adjutant General, I asked him, well, you know, how many surveillance cameras did I go through just to go from the gate to sit down here and talk to you? So the fact that if you think we're not being surveilled, we're being surveilled all the time. And indeed, we know that, the EPA, Kansas City, Missouri Police Department has a helicopter. All these things are used for surveillance. They just happen to have a person in them.
With the FBI announcing this week, telling a Senate panel that, yes, they've been using them for domestic surveillance in the United States already. Could they have already been used in Kansas and Missouri, Dave Helling? We've already been spied upon?
I keep wondering what's flying over my house. You know,
Yes.
like, what is that thing up there? I do think the concern that Sam talks about, Stacey, about public use of drone aircraft is one concern. That is police departments, Army, safety people. But there's a whole other issue about private use of these things and whether people can just go out and buy them off the shelf and in essence fly over your backyard, barbecue or anything else. And I think there will be some legislative attention paid to that as well.
Well, the FAA is writing rules right now. As it stands now, if the drones fly below 400 feet, pretty much anybody can do it. If they get above 400 feet, you have to have a pilot's license. This is all trying to control the civilian airspace.
Right, but the FAA will do nothing with respect to privacy. That's going to be a patchwork, state-by-state deal. Whether or not someone, particularly the police, can fly over your backyard fence and see what you're doing.
And ultimately,
that's real privacy concerns.
And ultimately, the federal government will get involved.
And the Kansas City Call has just purchased a drone?
Yes.
Okay, alrighty. We're going to get to the Jackson County appraisal mess next week on our Kansas City Week in Review program. That is it for this week's show. Thanks to our news reviewers from KCTV5, Stacey Cameron, and the Call's Eric Wesson, KCPT special correspondent Sam Zeff, and Dave Helling of the Kansas City Star. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.